He didn't merely crush her emotions. He attempted to demolish her confidence before an audience. At the city's premier charity event, Marcus Thorne showcased his fresh, youthful fiancée as if she were a prize, openly labeling his former spouse, Sophia Lang, as an imperfect and abandoned artifact. He gloated about his superior choice, reveling in the cheers, utterly convinced that he had banished her from any scene of triumph. Yet he committed a fatal error. He believed she was hiding away in sorrow. He couldn't fathom that while he was flaunting a gem, she had discreetly claimed an entire treasure trove. What unfolds when a person's arrogance issues a promise that fate refuses to honor? Keep watching. The atmosphere in the opulent ballroom of the Regency Palace was heavy with the aroma of wealth and deception. It was the yearly Moonbeam Charity Gala, an evening where Chicago's business moguls and elite society convened to outspend, outstyle, and outdazzle each other under the pretense of generosity. For Sophia Lang, this marked her initial solo appearance at a significant gathering since parting ways with Marcus Thorne. She had forged her own reputation, her contemporary art space gaining acclaim as a hub for budding talents. But in these elite groups, she remained, and likely always would be, known as Marcus Thorne's ex-partner. She spotted him from afar, a predator in a custom-tailored Armani suit, with Aria Voss clinging to his side. Aria was, Sophia conceded, stunning. 10 years her junior, with tresses like molten silver and a grin honed for ultimate allure and photographic perfection. She was a social media sensation evolved into a wellness advocate, a profession that appeared to revolve around exuding elegance in lavish settings. Sophia was sipping a flute of sparkling wine, conversing with an older trustee about a possible art grant, when she sensed an abrupt change in the room's vibe. Marcus had ascended the podium. It wasn't scheduled, but a substantial impromptu contribution often reshaped the itinerary. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's tone resonated, suave and assured. He flashed a grin that had sealed multi-million-dollar agreements and once enchanted her soul. I'd like to pause on this evening of benevolence to discuss fresh starts, about recognizing genuine worth. A wave of courteous claps ensued. Sophia experienced a chilling apprehension creeping up her back. She recognized that inflection. This was Marcus's "I'm the ruler of everything" demeanor. As several of you are aware, he proceeded, motioning for Aria to ascend beside him. The past 12 months have involved shifts for me, yet they've also brought remarkable insights. He encircled Aria's remarkably slender midsection, drawing her near. The glow from the crystal fixtures captured the massive emerald solitaire on her ring finger, casting a cascade of green sparks over the nearest attendees. I've learned what it entails to be with an individual who genuinely motivates, whose allure, both external and internal, stands as a virtue on its own. He grinned at Aria, who flushed modestly. When you're striving for the pinnacle, you require a companion who fits the image, one who radiates, one impeccable. Each phrase was a precisely targeted barb. Sophia recalled the late evenings she devoted to aiding his speech preparations, editing his documents, leveraging her fine arts background to assist him in bonding with quirky art enthusiast backers. She remembered foregoing a visit to her ill grandmother, due to his vital, schmoozing occasion. He dubbed her his hidden advantage in those days. Now, before an assembly of their past acquaintances and associates, he was portraying her as a hindrance, a defective model he needed to abandon. A gentleman at an adjacent table, a venture capitalist named Victor Kane, who had served as an usher at their nuptials, bent toward his spouse and murmured, not discreetly enough, "That's a savage jab at Sophia." Harsh. Sophia remained immobile, her wine glass weighing heavily in her grasp. She sensed countless gazes flickering between her and the luminous duo on stage. Some were sympathetic, others morbidly intrigued. It was a communal lynching, and she was the focal point. "Therefore, I'd like to suggest a cheers," Marcus declared, elevating his goblet. "To my extraordinary fiancée, Aria. Gratitude for revealing to me what an absolute perfection truly embodies. To a tomorrow as luminous and exquisite as you." The chamber burst into ovation, blending sincere zeal for the display and anxious tension. Marcus's glance scanned the crowd, and briefly, his eyes locked with Sophia's. No regret lingered there, merely a frosty, victorious spark. He was asserting dominance. "I triumphed. You failed." Sophia didn't recoil. She maintained his stare, her demeanor a deliberate veil of composure. She wouldn't grant him the pleasure of witnessing her collapse. She savored a measured, intentional swallow of her bubbly, the fizz tasting bitter on her tongue. Once the salute concluded, she set the vessel on a circulating server's platter, pivoted with a grace she scarcely possessed, and exited the hall, chin elevated. The echo of her stilettos on the granite surface was the sole noise she permitted. She ignored the murmurs trailing her, the dissections of her communal disgrace. She concentrated only on the refreshing evening breeze awaiting her outdoors, a soothing relief to the scorching embarrassment flushing her face. The journey to her Lakeview townhouse blurred. Sophia gazed at the shimmering illuminations of Chicago, each a tiny puncture in the veil of her poise. The chauffeur, a compassionate fellow named Carlos Ramirez she'd employed for ages, kept peeking at her via the mirror, his forehead creased with worry, yet remained silent. He had transported her and Marcus to innumerable similar occasions. He knew she wouldn't weep. The mortification was too acute, too icy for sobs. It resembled a fragment of frost embedded in her torso. Marcus hadn't simply offended her. He had retroactively diminished their whole shared existence. He had repositioned a dozen years of alliance as a commercial pact where she hadn't fulfilled the visual standards. Impeccable, the term reverberated in her thoughts. He sought flawlessness, a mannequin to complement his aspirations. She had been a human with ideas, aspirations, and the sporadic worry crease. Her imperfection was her humanness. Once within her residence, the quietude was a comforting hug. The area was wholly hers, brimming with artwork that resonated with her, volumes she cherished, and a tranquility Marcus's agitated vigor had perpetually disrupted. She collapsed onto a plush couch, the surge of her graceful departure at last waning, yielding to deep exhaustion. Her mobile vibrated on the side table. It was a message from her closest companion, Lila Harper. "I just learned what he pulled. That guy's a beast. You holding up?" "Heading over." Sophia grinned slightly, appreciative of the staunch devotion. "I'm fine, really. No need. Let's brunch tomorrow. Got news for you." She set the device aside, and her eyes landed on a framed image on the shelf, one she kept angled from view. She retrieved it. It wasn't of her and Marcus. It was a spontaneous capture from several weeks prior in a sunlit bistro in Rome. In it, she was chuckling, head tilted back, a dab of sorbet on her nose. The gentleman opposite regarded her, not the lens, and his look conveyed such deep, unprotected fondness that it stirred her heart positively. Julian Reed. The title was a seismic event in the realms of innovation and commerce. However, he was absent from gossip columns. He was a famous hermit, the creator of a programming conglomerate who prized his seclusion above everything. They had encountered one another half a year ago, not at a soiree, but at her exhibit space. He'd entered on a drizzly Wednesday midday, soaked in sans retinue, to silently examine a fresh display. He wasn't merely eyeing the valuations. He was appreciating the creations. They conversed for 2 hours regarding the strokes of a specific work, the creator's purpose, the sentiment it stirred. He was unaware of her former spouse's identity, and for the first occasion in ages, she didn't sense like Sophia, once Thorn. She was simply Sophia. Their bond had flourished distant from scrutinizing gazes. a concealed haven she had cultivated with intense guardianship. It was authentic and subdued and profound. It was all her union with Marcus lacked. Julian adored her for her intellect, her zeal, her crow's feet. He termed the tiny mark over her brow, a memento from a youthful skate mishap, the punctuation on his beloved phrase. He hadn't attended the event that night since he loathed such affairs, deeming them vanity displays. He was in Paris finalizing a transaction that would eclipse anything Marcus had ever handled. Her phone hummed once more. This time it was him. No words, just a video chat. She inhaled deeply, steadied herself, and responded, mustering a grin. There you are. Julian's timbre was a deep, soothing murmur that calmed her rattled senses right away. He was in a suite, appearing fatigued yet content. I feared you'd be resting. How was the vanity display? It went as anticipated, she replied, her tone steady. Plenty of ostentation. He scrutinized her expression, his insight alarmingly keen. You're shielding yourself. What occurred, Sophie? She paused. Then the barrier crumbled. The account spilled forth, not in fury's flood, but in a monotone, exhausted recounting of Marcus's address. The salute, the emerald band, the group's collective scrutiny. Julian heard without interjection, his face solidifying from worry to a calm, icy wrath. When she concluded, a prolonged hush followed. That individual, Julian uttered at last, his voice perilously soft, is an idiot. A boisterous, uncertain, and remarkably vicious idiot. He halted. Are you truly okay, darling? I am now, she murmured. And it was accurate. Voicing it to him had reframed it. Marcus was a clamorous youngster drumming for notice. Julian was the silent sovereign who commanded the realm. He just makes me feel like I squandered so much time. Never, Julian declared intensely. You constructed an existence. He merely occupied it. He didn't shape you, Sophia. Now, a query for you, unrelated to him. He adjusted the view. Beside him on the surface was a plain, refined navy velvet case. He revealed it. Within, on the somber fabric, rested a band. It wasn't an ostentatious chunk like Arius. It was a ruby the shade of a dusk horizon, fashioned in a timeless, graceful pear form and bordered by two understated, flawlessly paired pearls. It was a band that murmured. It didn't bellow. It was eternal, akin to the masterpieces he admired. I planned this for Rome next month, he stated, his voice gentling. In the bistro where we first sensed our connection. But now seems ideal. I don't want another evening where you feel diminished. Sophia Lang, you're the most intelligent, empathetic, and authentically lovely lady I've encountered. You aren't a decoration. You are the whole assortment. Will you wed me? Tears arrived at last. But they weren't of disgrace or debasement. They were of immense, unforeseen delight. The frost in her core dissolved, supplanted by a heat that permeated her being. Yes, she exhaled, laughter mingling with the drops. Julian. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Excellent, he replied, a gradual, radiant smile expanding on his visage. Now, regarding your former spouse, I believe it's time he grasps a teaching on authentic worth. The dawn following the gala, Marcus Thorne basked in a surge of self-contentment. His workspace at Thorne Investments, a streamlined, sparse area surveying the steel valleys of the financial district, resembled a royal chamber. The account of his salute was already buzzing through the elite. He'd gotten numerous messages from allies and competitors alike, all echoes of the identical sentiment. Audacious action. Thorne. Area's a knockout. Word is you staged a spectacle last night. He was viral. He was pertinent. He was the conqueror. His fiancée, Aria, had been thrilled. The images of her in her jewel-dominated celebrity news and pertinent elite blogs. Her social media audience had surged by 50,000 in hours. For her, the harshness of the instance was totally overshadowed by the glow of the exposure. "You were incredible, sweetheart," she'd cooed during morning meal at their loft residence. "So commanding. Everyone's discussing us." "They're discussing a dominant duo." Marcus amended her, mildly, savoring his coffee. "That's the image we're crafting." His attention that day wasn't on societal chatter, though. It was on the grandest transaction of his profession, the purchase of Quantum Logistics, a pioneering AI supply chain firm set to transform worldwide transport. The enterprise was closely owned, infamously selective about collaborators, and its elusive creator had been elusive. But Marcus was optimistic. He'd recently obtained a concluding influx of capital from a group of global financiers and was prepared to present an offer so bold it couldn't be declined. This pact would propel him from a prosperous participant to a myth. He devoted the forenoon to calls with his attorneys and his overseas supporters, his delivery sharp with command. All aligned seamlessly. He even dispatched a smug, boastful note to a shared acquaintance, aware it would reach Sophia. "Inform me you viewed the shots from yesterday. Some items are simply an enhancement in all aspects. Hope she's managing." He envisioned Sophia encountering it, imagining her silent mourning in her isolated townhouse. The notion provided him a slight rush of dominance. He had advanced to grander and superior pursuits while she was a remnant of his history. Near midday, his direct line sounded. It was Victor Kane, his ex-usher. "Marcus," Victor stated, his tone taut. "We must converse, Victor. Pleasant to connect. You catch the impact we created?" "I did. Not the purpose of my call. I'm picking up odd buzz about the quantum transaction." Marcus's upbeat spirit dimmed a bit. "What sort of buzz?" "All secure here." "That's it. Rumors say quantum's off the market. At least for you." Victor explained. "I learned their executives held an urgent session this morning. Something on reassessing prospective buyers via integrity and enduring goals." Marcus sneered. "Integrity? This is the financial district, not a moral seminar. They're bluffing to inflate the cost." "No concerns. I'm unsure, pal." The term exclusion was mentioned. From a reliable contact. A lump of discomfort knotted in Marcus's gut. Exclusion. Preposterous. Who holds such sway? No names, just that the proprietor is choosy and dislikes braggarts. Marcus concluded the discussion with a sharp rejection, but the assurance he'd harbored all morning started unraveling. He directed his aide to connect him with Quantum Logistics' head immediately. An hour elapsed, then more. His outreach went ignored. His correspondences got robotic replies. It was as if a barrier had descended. Meanwhile, in her tranquil exhibit space, Sophia experienced a markedly contrasting day. She and Julian had opted to maintain their betrothal confidential briefly, to relish it privately prior to the unavoidable press frenzy. The ruby band resided in its container in her vault, but she sensed its invisible presence on her digit, a covert joyful vow. She was in her workspace wrapping up arrangements for a fresh showcase when her phone illuminated. It was Julian. "Morning betrothed," he said. His voice was buoyant, but she detected an undertone of resolve. "Morning betrothed," she answered. The term delightful. "Is all well in Paris?" "All is splendid. I just concluded a fascinating dialogue with my executives," he noted. "Particularly the executives of a modest supply chain venture I launched years back. You may know at Quantum Logistics." Sophia straightened abruptly. "Hold on, you possess Quantum Logistics?" "I'm the exclusive holder," he affirmed. "I initiated it as a hobby. It's entertaining what expands when you avoid the limelight. It appears a fellow called Marcus Thorne has been striving intensely to acquire it." Sophia was mute. The pure universal irony was astonishing. Marcus's profession-pivotal pact, meant to solidify his heritage, rested entirely with the individual he had unknowingly provoked. "He doesn't realize you're linked to it, right?" she inquired. "He's clueless," Julian stated. And now, she heard the chilly gratification in his tone. "He also doesn't know that my chief backer in Paris, who aided in sealing my recent funding, was set to support his ultimate proposal for the buyout. Was past tense. The elements aligned. Marcus assumed his financing was firm. He was oblivious that the funds were ultimately governed by the same entity whose firm he aimed to purchase and whose betrothed he had just openly shamed. "This morning," Julian went on, "my staff got a notification from our press tracking system. It highlighted a piece from Celebrity News. It included a charming image of your former spouse and his associate, and it cited his salute from last night fully. My executives were unimpressed. They believe his image, as he terms it, didn't match our firm's principles of restraint and dignity." Marcus's own statements, his craving for communal endorsement, served as the tool to unravel him. "So what's next?" Sophia questioned, her pulse quickening. "For the moment, zero," Julian replied. "We'll allow him to fret. We'll permit him to dial and message and ponder why the transaction of his dreams vanished. Let him lounge in his royal space and sense the barriers contracting. Certain teachings are optimally absorbed in quiet." A week transpired. For Marcus Thorne, it was 7 days of mounting irritation that soured into sheer alarm. The hush from quantum logistics was total and overwhelming. His communications went to recordings. His notes remained unacknowledged. The unbreakable pact he had vaunted was now spectral, an illusion he couldn't seize. Worse, the mutters in the financial district had amplified into a consistent, condemning hum. Gossip spread that Thorne Investments was shaky, that Marcus had forfeited his skill. The overseas financiers, once eager to endorse him, abruptly grew elusive. Their assured funds, the essence of his purchase strategy, were postponed indefinitely, awaiting a sector assessment, a weak pretext he recognized as false. He was being commercially isolated, and he lacked understanding of the cause or perpetrator. The strain commenced eroding his carefully sculpted existence. The loft residence, formerly an emblem of his achievement, now resembled a luxurious prison. His connection with Arya, founded on superficial mutual conceit, started revealing fine fractures. "Why are you so uptight constantly?" she queried. One night, browsing her device, she reclined on a cream leather chaise, ideally posed for a self-portrait. "You're spoiling the atmosphere." "The atmosphere?" Arya, Marcus barked, striding the expanse of their panoramic windows. "The largest transaction of my career is collapsing without cause, and you're concerned about the atmosphere." "Well, it's not my issue," she sulked, directing the device's lens at herself to inspect her image. "Perhaps you weren't as capable as you believed." "Considered that?" The remark, meant to be childish, hit a sensitive spot. It was the sole option his pride rejected. "This is an orchestrated assault." He fumed, more inwardly than to her. "Someone's targeting me." His suspicion escalated. He berated his staff, blamed his counsel for ineptitude, and perceived plots in every postponed reply. The poised, charismatic commerce giant was yielding to a snarling, frantic individual. Arya, who had committed to being the partner of a victor, observed his change with increasing aversion. The authority and prosperity that had drawn her were dissipating, exposing only a resentful, irate man. This wasn't the image she desired for herself. Meanwhile, Sophia's existence progressed oppositely. She and Julian had passed the week in a cocoon of serene happiness. He had returned from Paris, and they spent nights not at events, but preparing meals in her snug kitchen or strolling lengthy paths through Grant Park post-sunset, unnoticed and serene. They discussed the horizon, not about resources and imaging, but about principles and visions. He aimed to sponsor an initiative making creativity available to youth in deprived areas, a concept derived from her enthusiasm. She wished to journey with him, not for visibility, but to experience the globe. Their existences intertwined, forming a fabric abundant with joint significance and reciprocal admiration. One dusk, they lounged by the hearth in her lounge when Julian's device alerted. He glanced, a scowl grazing his mouth. "What?" Sophia asked. "It's the seasonal summary for my personal firm," he explained. "It catalogs all my direct and indirect assets. Something here I overlooked." He rotated the device toward her. It was an intricate diagram of ventures and proxy entities. His digit paused on one section. Reed Enterprises holds a controlling interest in a German venture capital group. That group, in turn, is the main supporter of the overseas financier alliance that Marcus depended on for his quantum proposal. Sophia examined the display. "So, the capital he relied on was yours throughout?" "Essentially, yes. He attempted to purchase my firm with my capital, unaware," Julian remarked, a somber amazement in his voice. The fellow's conceit rivals only his absence of investigation. This was the concluding fragment. It wasn't merely that Julian possessed the objective company. He managed the financing to obtain it. He had Marcus in a monetary vice, and Marcus was so oblivious he couldn't perceive the clamps tightening. Propelled by a frantic quest for clarity, Marcus engaged a confidential sleuth, a costly former intelligence operative named Drake Harlan, to uncover quantum logistics backer. For days, Drake yielded nothing. The proprietorship was concealed beneath strata of opaque international firms. But Marcus was unyielding, disbursing a steep sum for Drake to probe further. At last, late one Friday twilight, Marcus received the contact. "I have an identity," Drake said, his tone rough. "It demanded a fortune, and I violated multiple regulations, but I possess it." "Who?" Marcus insisted, his fingers blanched, clutching his phone. "Who controls quantum?" A beat on the line. "The final controller at the apex is a man named Julian Reed." The name struck Marcus like a strike. Julian Reed, the innovation tycoon, the isolate. He'd never encountered him, but he knew the myth. Reed was in an entirely superior category. He was ancient wealth, modern wealth, and all wealth variants. Why would such a figure sabotage him? They didn't mingle in identical spheres. No shared past. It was illogical. He disconnected, his thoughts whirling. He now possessed a label for his adversary, but the reason was an utter enigma. He traversed his workspace, the sensation of impotence corroding him. He, Marcus Thorne, who boasted of knowing all and sundry, had been ambushed. He gazed out at the metropolis beneath, the metropolis he planned to dominate, and for the initial time felt diminutive and exceedingly exposed. He was oblivious that the genuine cause of his demise resided by a hearth mere miles northward, her palm lightly on the limb of the man who was methodically and silently deconstructing his universe. Marcus's fixation with Julian Reed engulfed him. He commanded his crew to assemble a thorough profile on the individual. Every documented venture, every speculated enterprise, every benevolent tie. The more he discovered, the more trivial he sensed. Reed functioned on a planetary magnitude that rendered Thorne investments akin to a juvenile's refreshment stall, but the core inquiry persisted as a frustrating gap. Why? Why would this economic colossus aim at him? He couldn't locate one link. No competing offers, no intersecting routes, no recalled societal offenses. He even tasked Drake, the sleuth, with exploring Reed's private affairs. But the man was a virtual specter, No scandalous snapshots, no resentful formers, no communal footprint. The individual's secrecy was impregnable. Marcus battled a phantom. It was maddening him. His transaction was defunct. His standing was shredded, and he hemorrhaged backers who distrusted his discernment. It occurred on a Tuesday dawn, a dreary, drizzly day aligning with his disposition, that the revelation erupted. It didn't manifest as a fiscal collapse or formal notice. It appeared on the front of Elegance, the metropolis's most authoritative upscale living periodical, an outlet more potent than the Financial Times for the spheres Marcus yearned to inhabit. His aide, a youthful lady he'd tormented for weeks, positioned the periodical on his workstation with quivering palms. "Mr. Thorne, you should view this." Marcus eyed it casually, then stiffened. The cover was a paragon of subtle refinement. It was a snapshot of two figures, not in a studio, but in what seemed a secluded courtyard, enveloped in gentle, organic illumination. A gentleman with ebony locks and a subdued, assured grin had his limb around a lady. The lady leaned against him, her countenance aglow with a peaceful, authentic bliss that Marcus had never witnessed on her previously. Her palm on his torso, and on her digit, a splendid dusk crimson ruby appeared to draw every ray toward it. The lady was Sophia. The gentleman was Julian Reed. The caption in striking, refined lettering proclaimed subtle dominance. Julian Reed and Sophia Lang on romance, creativity, and the fresh essence of achievement. Marcus sensed the breath escape him. It was as though reality had skewed. He seized the periodical, his limbs trembling as he turned to the main article. The piece was a 10-page feature brimming with exquisite snapshots of them at Sophia's exhibit space, in a study of a vast rural manor, evidently Julian's, strolling linked in a Roman square. The narrative was more crushing than the visuals. It was a laudatory overview framing them as the metropolis's emerging scholarly and artistic dominant pair. It outlined Julian's discreet benevolence, his ingenious commercial acumen, and his profound esteem for Sophia's endeavors. It commended Sophia's sharp vision for creativity, her tenacity, and her elegance. It narrated her fresh phase post a challenging separation, depicting her not as a casualty, but as a rebirth who had ascended more potent and luminous than prior. And then the statement from Julian. The writer had queried what attracted him to Sophia. In a realm teeming with individuals clamoring for recognition, Reed was cited, "She possesses depth. She doesn't require the spotlight, since she is her own core. She is unique, not a duplicate. She is simply impeccable." Impeccable. His term, the one he had wielded to degrade her, now elevated her to a summit he could never scale. It was a deliberate, ruinously accurate retaliation. The piece proceeded to declare their betrothal, portraying the ruby band not by its size, but by its lineage. A scarce, responsibly obtained gem from an overlooked quarry in Madagascar. It was a nuanced yet evident critique of the garish, conspicuous, and traditional emerald solitaire he had bestowed on Aria. Marcus gaped at the snapshot of them, his intellect at last horrendously linking the elements. Quantum logistics, the overseas financiers, the mutters, the exclusion. It wasn't commerce. It had never concerned commerce. It was intimate. Reed hadn't assaulted him as a competitor. He had assaulted him as Sophia's former spouse. The lady he had rejected and openly ridiculed was betrothed to the very individual who grasped his whole vocational existence in his grasp. He emitted a choked, primal noise, blending mirth and lament. He had engaged in tic-tac-toe, advancing his tokens with conceited surety, while Julian Reed had pursued multidimensional strategy that commenced the instant Marcus spoke at that gala. He had assumed he was inflicting the fatal strike when he had merely heralded his own demise. His workspace portal creaked ajar. It was Arya. She clutched her own edition of the periodical, her complexion ashen, her expertly done cosmetics failing to conceal the astonishment in her gaze. "Marcus," she uttered, her voice scarcely audible. "Did you catch this? Is it authentic?" Marcus shifted from the periodical to his fiancée. He perceived her not as a prize any longer, but as a burden, an emblem of his own superficial, disastrous error. The exquisite, impeccable adjunct to his triumph was now the tangible representation of his defeat. "Yes," he stated, his tone empty. "It's authentic." He observed the computation in her gaze, the emerging awareness that the image she had linked to was now poisonous. The authority, the wealth, the prestige, it was all vanished, or would be soon, and it had all been stripped by the subdued, modest lady he had been so sure he had abandoned. The repercussions from the elegance piece weren't a mild descent. It was a cascade. Marcus's phone, ominously quiet for weeks, commenced overheating. It was a symphony of inquiries from journalists at the Chicago Tribune, the Financial Times, and numerous eager scandal sheets, all demanding a statement. His meticulously shaped persona was fractured, supplanted by a lone, degrading parody, the haughty former spouse, the dolt who had discarded a monarch. Unaware that an emperor awaited, he was no longer the winner in his tale. He was the antagonistic minor role in Sophia's far more engaging one. He withdrew to his loft, pulling the dense velvet drapes as if to exclude the globe. But escape from reality was impossible. He saw it in Arya's gaze. The obsequious worship she once held for him had soured into a frigid, evaluating glare. She viewed him as a poor venture, a share that had crashed abruptly. "You must rectify this," she commanded, her tone piercing and fragile. She wasn't merely browsing her device now. She was packing. Not a minor valise, but a sizable Gucci chest, its maw agape and eager for her opulent items. "Rectify it? How should I rectify it?" "Arya," he growled, traversing the expansive lounge like a confined beast. "The man is Julian Reed. He's legendary. He could acquire and dispose of me countless times and ignore the expense." "That's your dilemma," she retorted, hurling a velvet gown into the chest with a fierce motion. "I link myself to your reputation, Marcus. I risked my image for you. I stood on stage and grinned while you degraded your ex-partner, all since you vowed a specific lifestyle. Now your reputation is filth. You're a joke, meaning I'm a joke. So you're departing?" he queried, a surge of disbelieving fury overtaking him. "After all, just so. My mom always advised severing deficits," she stated calmly, not glancing as she neatly stowed a wool pullover. "This is me severing deficits." She locked the chest, the noise resounding the conclusiveness of her statements. She proceeded to the quartz ledge by the entrance, grasped the massive emerald band, and held it betwixt her digits as if tainted. She released it. It skidded across the glossy rock with a racket that resounded excessively in the mute space. "Take this back," she declared with a scornful gesture. "It's likely your sole remaining asset, and honestly, it's appearing gaudy." She exited without retrospection, her footwear tapping an indignant cadence on the granite. The portal shut gently after her, abandoning Marcus solitary in a vast residence with the specter of his aspiration. Driven by a poisonous mix of fury, shame, and half a container of Glenfiddich 30, Marcus executed his ultimate, most imprudent action. He charged from his residence, entered his vehicle, and drove to Sophia's exhibit space. He needed to confront her, to challenge her, to compel her to recognize the ruin she had inflicted. He erupted into the exhibit space, a frenzied gleam in his eyes. The venue was tranquil, a sharp opposition to the tempest within him. He located Sophia in the primary display area, serenely debating the positioning of a fresh carving with her aid. She appeared luminous, attired in a plain yet refined emerald frock. She exuded an air of assurance more brilliant than any ornament. "Sophia," he said, his voice a deep, menacing rumble. She pivoted, her look composed. Unfazed, she sent her aide away with a soft inclination. "Marcus, you ought not be present." "Ought I not?" He advanced toward her, his volume escalating with each stride. "You caused this. You and him. This was your vengeance scheme, correct? My transaction, my backers. You orchestrated everything." Sophia regarded him, not with dread or ire, but with a deep, fatigued compassion that incensed him more. "You attribute me excessive merit, Marcus, and yourself insufficient. I didn't need to act. Don't deceive me," he hissed, his face close to hers. "That piece, that statement, impeccable. You turned my word against me. That was a blade, and you rotated it. The only offense I'm committing," she stated, her tone steady and firm, "is loving a decent man who perceives me truly. The remainder, that was entirely you. You were the one who ascended a platform and proclaimed to everyone that a female's merit is gauged by her looks. You were the one so obscured by your conceit that you neglected investigating a multi-billion enterprise. You were so occupied crafting an image that you overlooked forging integrity." She advanced a step, and for the first time he beheld not the serene, compliant lady he had wed, but the potent, self-assured lady she had evolved into. He reflexively retreated. "Julian didn't demolish you, Marcus. He merely presented a reflection, and you fractured. He didn't assault you. He simply observed your self-sabotage. Your salute at the gala wasn't an assault on me. It was a communal admission of your ingrained uncertainty and shallowness. And in his domain, in the realm of genuine authority and depth, that's a lethal defect. You weren't vanquished in an aggressive acquisition. You were merely barred from a contest you were unaware of participating in. Each statement was bare verity, and it impacted with the might of a corporeal hit. The wrath and liquor couldn't shield him. The blaze in his core extinguished, yielding a vast, vacant void. He had constructed his whole persona on a base of apparent triumph and communal endorsement, and in weeks it had disintegrated. He surveyed the exhibit space at the exquisite, provocative creations, at the lady he had so nonchalantly and harshly rejected. He had exchanged her for a mirage, and the mirage had splintered. He had boasted about his fiancée's transient allure, never comprehending his ex-partner held a fortitude and poise that were boundlessly more precious and potent. He began, but the phrases eluded him. What remained to express? He had forfeited, not to her, not to Julian Reed, but to himself. "You should depart, Marcus," Sophia said gently, turning away to examine the carving. The exchange concluded. His role in her existence was ultimately and completely ended. Half a year later, the name Marcus Thorne was a phantom in the financial district. A warning narrative murmured softly at private lounges. Thorne Investments had collapsed with astonishing rapidity, its holdings sold off hastily to settle a heap of obligations. The streamlined loft, once his tribute to accomplishment, was vended at a degrading deficit. Marcus's final communal appearance wasn't in elite columns, but in a blurry, impromptu photo captured outside an eatery in Evanston, Illinois. He was dining with his folks. The renowned strut was supplanted by the tired, hunched posture of a man overwhelmed by his own arrogance. He gazed into his beverage, evading his dad's disillusioned gaze. He had absorbed the toughest instruction. The vista from a knoll's crest is merely inches above soil, and the descent is equally agonizing. For Sophia and Julian, existence had turned into a seminar in subdued, intentional bliss. Their nuptials opposed the Moonbeam Gala. They exchanged vows on a sun-bathed ledge balcony in Sorrento, surveying the sparkling Adriatic Sea. No media, no throngs, just 20 intimate kin and companions. Sophia donned a straightforward, astonishingly graceful dress by a creator she had aided in promoting, and she bore a cluster of laurel stems and scented ivory roses. Julian, in a fitted cotton ensemble, regarded her as if she were the sole entity existing. Their pledges weren't about consolidations or holdings. They articulated joint principles, mutual esteem, and the assurance of an alliance founded on honesty. The lone lensman was Lila, Sophia's closest ally, who seized instances of true mirth and furtive embraces, not staged scenes for a journal. Their shared life became a fluid merger of their enthusiasms. The Creative Start Initiative was no ego endeavor. It was their collective goal. They invested vast sums into establishing advanced artistic hubs in community schools nationwide. One midday, they toured the inaugural finished hub in the South Side. They wandered through a bright chamber packed with kids drawing, shaping, and creating tunes on fresh machines. A youthful lass with color-streaked cheeks proudly displayed her vivid artwork to Sophia. In that instant, observing the flicker of invention spark in a youth's gaze, Sophia sensed an achievement deeper than any exhibit transaction or societal victory. She was no longer delineated by the males in her life. She was Sophia Lang, benefactor, creativity specialist, and joint designer of a significant heritage. One brisk fall dusk, they stood on the balcony of their fresh abode, a remarkable contemporary dwelling overlooking Lake Michigan, distant from the metropolis's hectic pulse. The design was ingenious, yet not showy, crafted to merge with the environment rather than overpower it. It was a dwelling, not a display item. Julian approached from behind Sophia, encircling her midsection as she surveyed the lake. The dusk heavens were a vortex of violet and amber, a wonder no creator could duplicate. "What occupies your mind, darling?" he inquired softly, placing his chin on her shoulder. She was silent briefly, observing the gleams commence twinkling on the far bank. "Recall that evening, the gala. I attempt to forget," he whispered into her strands. "But I'll always remember the expression in your eyes during our video chat, the resilience restraining such agony. I felt so insignificant," she admitted, her voice hushed, so obliterated. "I believe a portion of me, for a dozen years, had embraced his notion of merit. I thought my value linked to his triumph. When he ascended and uttered those things, it was as if he affirmed my profoundest dread, that I was expendable. And presently, he encouraged tenderly." Sophia rotated in his embrace to confront him, her eyes lucid and vivid. She extended and caressed the subtle mark above his brow, a motion of close acquaintance. "Now I understand my merit was never his to dictate. It was eternally mine to claim. My time with him wasn't squandered. It was an extended, arduous, and finally essential schooling. It instructed me the distinction between sparkle and treasure, between clamor and essence, between an image and a spirit. In a sense, his harshness was a boon. It severed the final bond and liberated me. It guided me here, to you." Julian grinned, his eyes brimming with the identical unprotected fondness she'd first noted in that Roman photo. He was an idiot, Sophia, a person perishing of dehydration while in a stream, because he was too entranced by his mirror to notice the vital fluid surrounding him. He never perceived you. He inclined and embraced her lips, an embrace that was fervent and tranquil, a proof of the subdued, immovable world they had constructed jointly. It wasn't an existence of turmoil or retribution. It was an existence of intent, alliance, and deep affection. They had succeeded not by overcoming a foe, but by electing to forge a superior realm, one lacking space for the superficial brutality of individuals like Marcus Thorne. The optimal retribution, they both recognized, wasn't a chilled serving in view. It was a warm, exquisite existence lived fully, genuinely, and distant from the den. Ultimately, this was never a tale of vengeance. It was a tale of merit. Marcus Thorne perceived merit in exteriors, in awards, in the crowd's clamor. He constructed an existence of crystal and was astonished when it fractured. Sophia, conversely, learned to discover merit in depth, in integrity, and in the subdued power of her own core. She constructed an existence of rock and forged a heritage. Her tale is a potent cue that authentic authority isn't about whom you trample to ascend, but about how many you elevate once there.